Did you ever love reading stories as a kid? For me, it wasn't the usual comics or novels that caught my attention. I was obsessed with a different kind of story, the kind that spoke of grand battles, powerful men, and the rise and fall of empires. One day, nostalgia hit me hard. I remembered one particular series that captivated me when I was younger. So, I went online and ordered the whole set again. As I flipped through the pages, memories came flooding back, and with them came an idea. What if I turned that story into a video? But not just any video, one with a more powerful, upgraded version. And that's how Napoleon was chosen. The emperor who dominated almost all of Europe for over a decade. Through his relentless wars, if war is an art, then Napoleon is nothing less than a master. So let's dive into the story of Napoleon, the master of war. August 15th, 1769. Corsica, a tiny island, newly annexed by France. That's where boy was born into a poor noble family. No one, absolutely no one, could have predicted that this child would one day crown himself Emperor of France. Napoleon Bonaparte was born just 3 months after Corsica was conquered by France. Because of that, he grew up with a strong dislike, even hatred for France. His father, however, quickly submitted to the new rulers and allied himself with the French in hopes of rising through the ranks. This difference in loyalty created constant conflict between father and son. His father, Carlo Bonaparte, was a minor noble and a struggling lawyer, while Carlo earned the income. It was Napoleon's mother, Letizia, who truly ruled the household. She was the strict disciplinarian, the keeper of order, the protector of the family's dignity. Napoleon revered her deeply, even though her discipline often came in the form of harsh beatings. Despite their poverty, Napoleon's parents wanted more for their children. They wanted them to receive a better education, a French education. So, with great effort and connections, they managed to send Napoleon and his older brother Joseph to a military school in France when Napoleon was just 9. At school, Napoleon was moody, introverted, and angry. He was often bullied by classmates for his Corsican accent and provincial manner. He had no friends, so he turned to books, history, mathematics, geography. Napoleon devoured them all. At 15. He graduated early and was admitted to an elite military academy in Paris. Only 4 months later, he received devastating news: his father had died. At just 16 years old. Still a cadet, Napoleon suddenly became the man of the house. He was now responsible for supporting his mother and siblings. This was the beginning of Napoleon's lifelong instinct to lead and take charge. A year later, he became a second lieutenant in the artillery. But because he had to send almost his entire salary back home, he lived a life of extreme frugality. No luxuries, no parties. His only joy was reading. But no matter how smart he was, Napoleon was still a poor Corsican officer in a society ruled by class and bloodlines in France. Noble birth and powerful connections meant everything. That's when something unexpected happened: the French Revolution, a tidal wave that promised a new order, where talent, not title, would determine your place in society. On July 14, 1789, the Bastille fell. France erupted into chaos, seeing opportunity. Napoleon returned to Corsica, hoping to rise there through revolutionary ideals, but he clashed with the island's former leader, Pasquale Paoli. His plan failed. So he went back to France and focused entirely on his military career. His first real breakthrough came in 1793, in the southern city of Toulon. Royalist rebels had taken control and opened the port to the British Navy. Napoleon, still an obscure artillery officer, proposed a daring plan to attack the British fleet by seizing the forts from the south. His strategy worked. The British fled. Toulon was saved. Napoleon was promoted to brigadier general, but his rise wasn't smooth. A political coup left him sidelined at one point. He was even unemployed, living in poverty. But once again, fate intervened. Royalist forces launched an uprising in Paris. Napoleon was summoned to crush the revolt. With ruthless efficiency, he deployed artillery across the city and decimated the insurgents. Victory brought him fame and wealth. He was promoted to Major General and made commander of the French army in the interior. And that's when he met Josephine, the widow of a nobleman, deep in debt, and a single mother. At first, Napoleon courted her for her connections, but then he fell madly in love. And fortunately for him, the feeling wasn't mutual. Josephine enjoyed his fame and fortune, but she didn't love him. She even cheated on him while he was away at war. Meanwhile, Europe was still a powder keg. The first coalition and alliance of monarchies, including Austria, Prussia, Spain, and Britain, was determined to crush revolutionary France. To defend itself, France needed to attack. Napoleon was assigned to command the southern army, the so-called Army of Italy. But when he arrived, he found a ragged, starving force riddled with corruption. His officers disrespected him. He was just 27. They called him a child. Napoleon responded swiftly and without mercy. Disobedience was punished. Discipline was restored. He inspired his men with fiery speeches. "We will take what we need from the enemy." And they did. He marched his army into Italy and began a brilliant campaign. He picked off his enemies one by one. He crushed the Piedmontese. He routed the Austrians. At the legendary Battle of Lodi, he led his troops across a deadly bridge under a hail of bullets to seize victory. On his march, Napoleon looted vast riches, gold, art, weapons, even entire museums. He turned on the Pope next, forcing the Vatican into surrender. He demanded territory, treasure, and priceless Renaissance masterpieces. Then he approached Vienna, Austria's capital. Terrified, the Austrians sued for peace. The Treaty of Leoben was signed under Napoleon's terms. Soon after, the Treaty of Campo Formio ended the First Coalition War. France gained vast new territories. Napoleon was hailed as a hero. He returned to Paris to thunderous applause. But while the public adored him, the government feared him, so they sent him away this time to invade Britain. But Napoleon had a different idea. Egypt, if he couldn't reach Britain directly, he would strike its empire at its heart, its lifeline to India. In 1798, Napoleon set sail with 30,000 troops, evading the British Navy. He took Malta, then landed in Alexandria. He stormed Cairo, took control, and set up a new administration. But Admiral Nelson of Britain finally caught up. At the Battle of the Nile, the French fleet was annihilated. Napoleon's army was now stranded in Egypt. The news spread. A second coalition formed, this time including Russia and the Ottoman Empire. Napoleon tried to take Ica, but failed. Then came devastating news. Austria and Russia had retaken northern Italy. France was politically unstable. Napoleon abandoned his army in Egypt and secretly returned to France. Back in Paris, he was welcomed like a savior. But this time, he returned with a plan to seize absolute power. In a swift and bloodless coup d'etat, Napoleon overthrew the government with help from political allies and his brother Lucien. In theory, 3 consuls were meant to rule. In reality, there was only one, Napoleon. He was now first consul, the most powerful man in France. But the second coalition still threatened France. Napoleon needed another campaign, this time to reclaim Italy, while the Austrians relaxed. Thinking the mountain passes were safe, Napoleon stunned them. He led his army across the frozen Alps, through blizzards and avalanches. He descended into Italy and struck fast. At the Battle of Marengo. He crushed the Austrian army. Then, at Hohenlinden, another decisive victory sealed Austria's defeat within months. Almost all of Europe signed peace treaties. The Second Coalition crumbled, only Britain remained. But that is a story for another day. With peace restored across most of Europe, Napoleon was no longer just a general. He was the architect of a new France, and in 1802, after a national referendum, the people gave him a new title, First Consul for life. But that wasn't enough. In 1804, in a moment that shocked the world, Napoleon did something no Frenchman had dared to do since the Revolution. He crowned himself emperor. Yes, he took the crown from the hands of the Pope and placed it on his own head. A symbolic act, a declaration to the world. I am not made by God. I am not chosen by blood. I am the maker of my own destiny. And just like that, a new empire was born. But peace with Britain was always fragile. In fact, it didn't last. By 1805, Britain formed a new coalition, this time with Austria and Russia. Napoleon knew what had to be done. He gathered his Grande Army and marched east. The Austrians fell first. But the real showdown was about to begin. December 2nd, 1805, the Battle of Austerlitz. Also known as the Battle of the Three Emperors, Napoleon, with 68,000 men, faced the combined might of Austria and Russia, almost 90,000 strong. But Napoleon was not intimidated. He played a dangerous game. He made his army appear weak. He pretended to retreat. He lured the Allies into overextending their lines, and when they were stretched too thin, he struck with brutal precision. In a matter of hours, he shattered two empires, over 36,000 enemy casualties. It was one of the greatest military masterpieces in history. Napoleon's reputation soared. He dismantled the Holy Roman Empire, an institution that had lasted for 1,000 years. In its place, he created the Confederation of the Rhine, filled with French puppet states. But victory bred enemies. In 1806, Prussia, feeling humiliated, declared war. Napoleon responded with lightning speed. In less than a month, he defeated the Prussians at Jena and Austerlitz. He marched into Berlin, the capital of Prussia, as a conqueror. Next came Russia. 1807, the Battle of Friedland. Napoleon crushed the Russian army, forcing Tsar Alexander I to negotiate. They met on a raft in the middle of the Niemen River. There, two emperors carved up Europe like it was a chessboard. France and Russia became uneasy allies. Prussia was humiliated. Austria was broken. Britain stood alone. Napoleon was at the height of his power. All of continental Europe bowed to him. He redrew borders, installed his brothers as kings, spread the Napoleonic code from Spain to Poland. He was emperor not just in title, but in fact. But even emperors have blind spots. In 1808, Napoleon made a fatal decision. He invaded Spain. At first, it was easy. He removed the Spanish king and placed his brother, Joseph Bonaparte, on the throne. But the Spanish people didn't surrender. Instead, they rose in revolt. A brutal guerrilla war began. Ambushes, sabotage, assassinations. For the first time, Napoleon's army was bleeding. Slowly, death by 1,000 cuts. And then came the worst part. Britain saw its chance. The Duke of Wellington landed in Portugal. British troops joined the Spanish resistance. A new front was opened. And Napoleon's empire began to crack. But nothing compared to the next disaster. 1812, Napoleon invades Russia. He assembled the largest army Europe had ever seen, over 600,000 men from across the empire. They marched across the continent, confident in victory. But Russia did not play by the rules. They retreated. They burned their own cities. They starved Napoleon's army. scorched the earth, destroyed every supply line. When Napoleon finally reached Moscow, he found it in flames. Winter came. Food vanished, soldiers froze, horses died, cannons were abandoned in the snow. Only 10,000 men survived the retreat from 600,000. Europe smelled blood. One by one, the old enemies returned: Austria, Prussia, Russia, Sweden, Britain. In 1813, the Battle of Leipzig, also called the Battle of Nations, sealed Napoleon's fate. He was defeated and forced to retreat to France. By 1814, the Allies reached Paris. Napoleon was forced to abdicate. He was exiled to the tiny island of Elba off the coast of Italy. But the story didn't end there. March 1st, 1815. Napoleon escapes. Early. With just a few hundred men, he lands on the southern coast of France. Soldiers sent to arrest him join him instead. He marches north. By the time he reaches Paris, tens of thousands have rallied to him. He reclaims the throne. The 100 Days had begun. But so had the end. June 18, 1815, the Battle of Waterloo. His final stand. He faced off against the Duke of Wellington and the Prussian army under Blücher. For a moment, it looked like Napoleon might win, but misjudgments, muddy train, and a relentless enemy turned the tide. He was defeated for the last time. This time, there would be no escape. Napoleon was exiled again, but not to Elba. He was sent to Saint Helena, a remote island in the South Atlantic, thousands of miles from Europe. There, in isolation, he spent the last 6 years of his life. He died in 1821, alone, surrounded not by armies or royalty but by silence. And yet, Napoleon's legacy lived on. He rewrote the map of Europe. He inspired revolutions, reformed laws, and shaped the modern world. He showed the power of ambition, of discipline, of believing fiercely in your own destiny. He once said, "Death is nothing, but to live defeated and inglorious is to die daily." Napoleon Bonaparte, a man who was born on a conquered island, yet almost conquered the world. So what do we take away from the life of Napoleon Bonaparte? Was he a hero, a tyrant, a genius, or simply a man who dared to dream too big? The truth is he was all of those things. He rose from obscurity, the son of a poor Corsican noble, and clawed his way to the very top of the world, not by luck, not by birthright, but by sheer will, brilliance, and relentless drive. He changed Europe. He shattered empires. He rewrote laws and redrew borders. He built schools, courts, and roads, and left behind a civil code still studied today. But he also made fatal mistakes. He overreached. He underestimated his enemies. He believed himself invincible until the cold of Russia and the fields of Waterloo proved otherwise. And yet centuries later, we still speak his name, not because he was perfect, but because he was human, flawed, brilliant, ambitious, passionate, a man who, for better or worse, refused to be ordinary. So remember this: greatness is not reserved for the chosen few. It is carved out by those who dare to challenge the world and themselves. Napoleon was not born to be emperor. He became one, and in doing so, he left behind not just a legacy, but a lesson for us all, that no matter where you come from, no matter how impossible the odds, you, too, can rise. You, too, can leave your mark. You, too, can change history. Thank you everyone for watching the whole video, or subscribe to the channel to receive more great videos about Napoleon.